Hello everybody and welcome back to The Racer's Mind. I'm Brandon, joined by Corey.
Both to the right, Brandon, both to the right.
Corey and Andrew. And welcome back, everybody. Our special episode that unfortunately has had to get pushed back for a couple of weeks now, but we're here doing this tonight, and well, we're here, the 10-year in review for iRacing. Yep,
we are here. Like I said, we'd do 10-year review. It was going to be 4 of us. We were going to have our PTR TV partner, Michael DeGroat, here, but unfortunately, real life got in the way. But we have our partner and kind of a little collaboration with PSI TV. So for those watching on the Facebook feed, you will know that face to my right. That way. Hi, Andrew. We can introduce yourself to the PTR crowd.
Yeah, how's it going? Good to be here.
Yep, so as without further ado, we don't want to bore you with too much introduction, but we will just kind of give a little bit of time for anybody watching live now to get onto the feed. So obviously iRacing has been out for 10 years. It has started, it kind of originated obviously off of NR 2003, which was from 03 till about 07, and then that got sold out and we lost NR 2003 development, but that code got started off onto iRacing. And obviously, kind of the beginning of iRacing was kind of an NR 2003-esque thing, but it's developed quite a lot in the past 10 years. And I've been here since day one. I know you guys haven't. How long have you guys been on the service for?
I've been on for almost 4 years now.
I've been on, let's see, we'll be coming up to 2 years this July.
Yep, so we will have some varying opinions just due to the fact that we all have different time frames on the service, different scopes, different things that we're into, so that'll kind of lead the debate. So to get things started tonight with the review, I want to bring up a video. It's going to be about a 2-minute video I'll have you guys watch, and it is going to be from Lee Diffie, who many of you will know as a broadcaster. He commentates on a lot of real-world stuff. Actually, a very excellent commentator. He did a little promo for iRacing about in 2009, so we'll take a look at that, and we'll give our thoughts.
The next generation of racing is here. Hello, I'm Lee Diffie from Speed, and welcome to iRacing.com, an innovative PC-based simulation service that allows you to climb into a virtual race car and compete head-to-head against thousands of other racers, starting with rookies to top-level pros from all over the world. At the core of the iRacing service is the most accurate and sophisticated racing simulation software ever created, and it's so good that professional racers swear by it as a training tool. Drivers like Dale Earnhardt Jr., Justin Wilson, AJ Allmendinger, and Alex Gurney, and many of them compete frequently in iRacing's online race series. But iRacing isn't just a training tool for the professionals. It's the basis of a new branch of motorsport, making the fun and excitement of real-time, professionally sanctioned racing available to everyone. iRacing offers unlimited seat time for a lot less money than you spend each month on your phone bill. And you don't need high-tech equipment or a computer engineering degree to get started. All you need is a reasonably current personal computer, a PC-compatible wheel and pedal set that you can buy online or at your local electronics store for less than $100. And finally, a broadband internet connection. iRacing's easy-to-use web-based service includes a quick start guide that makes it simple to download the software and start racing. Once you're in, you're away. iRacing has a wide variety of cars and tracks available, all modelled to the finest detail. Every major North American track and a diverse selection of oval and road racing machines. And new ones are being added all the time. Whether you're a pro wanting to tune up for your next event, an amateur attempting to learn a new track, or someone who dreams of enjoying the thrills of high-speed competition, iRacing offers everything from practice to arrive and drive racing to World Championship competition. Check out iRacing.com to see how easy it is to get started. The next generation of racing is here.
All right, so we're back after that little clip. So I know what I want to say, but if anybody wants to make a point for me,
go ahead, Corey. Why don't you start things off?
So if anybody has watching now has been around for our other TRMs, to use the abbreviation, I have always been one to be critiquing of iRacing on the tracks and the visual quality of it. Not so much saying that the graphics are bad, but the one thing I did notice, we saw a couple clips of Atlanta, like Las Vegas, and a lot of that stuff looks extremely familiar to what we are racing on now, and that video came out 9 years ago. So it's a little disappointing to me that visually, while yes, things have updated with new tracks, a lot still looks strikingly similar to a decade ago.
Yeah, that's something that I agree with as well. One thing I noticed in the video is, well, something that obviously still holds true today is how much talk about the online racing, and something that iRacing only offers is the online racing. And it just seems like that was very, very emphasized in the video, and kind of an arrive and drive type deal with their thousands of members and everything else. And, you know, it seemed like then, obviously I wasn't on iRacing back when the video was released, but it seemed like then there was or so it seemed, that there was a lot more activity online, and well, you were almost guaranteed to get into a race with, you know, pretty good sized fields, and that's not so much the case today, depending on what series it is, of course.
Oh, we don't get you, Andrew.
We're fixed. All right.
There we go.
I was just totally agreeing with Brandon right there, saying that's completely right in a lot of regards. There's a lot of series now that just kind of sit there stagnating, and you know, you could argue that maybe those should be removed or somehow revitalized or even just replaced. But you know, there's definitely been a change in iRacing, I guess, and what people want. And a lot of things stay stagnant. There's a lot of series that have been around that don't really need to be around anymore, but have been around for years and years and years. A lot of cars, a lot of tracks that are the exact same way. Granted, I don't think any content should be removed. There's definitely just been an entire shift in focus.
Yeah, and this we'll get into another segment we have later, where each of us will kind of give our own specific thoughts towards what we think our pros and cons are of iRacing. But you bring up a good point, Andrew, and I've brought this up before with the guys, and I'll bring it up again, is iRacing is different than a PC2, Project Cars 2. It's different than an Assetto Corsa, a Gran Turismo, a Forza, etc., in the sense that iRacing came out in 2008. And disclaimer, this is not going to be an entire review degrading iRacing, but it's always easier to degrade than it is to praise, so we will get to the praise later, believe us. But just for right now, iRacing came out 2008. We've seen Project Cars 1, Project Cars 2, we've seen Forza, however many, we've seen R-Factor 1 and 2, but iRacing doesn't change. iRacing is still iRacing. So we have tracks ever evolving. We never really have a kind of a refresh, you know what I mean? Like where some tracks may not make the next game on Project Cars 3. They may not all carry over. Some cars may not carry over. We have a content list that grows and grows and grows, and like you guys said, a lot of that is just being dusty on the back shelf, not being used, but we continue to add more, which in turn makes more content get dusty and unused and in many ways wasteful for many people.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue, is more and more sanctioning bodies come onto iRacing. Obviously, they're going to want all of their series in iRacing, and as we add more series, some of the more difficult or less popular series that, you know, you'd get good fields before because, you know, they were kind of the only option, they get left in the dust when these sanctions or other series come on board, and that's something that you're starting to see more and more of.
Yeah, that's totally right. And you have, like Brandon mentioned, especially the World of Outlaws, I think, and Red Bull GRC. Granted, there's that whole can of worms that can be opened later, I guess, but especially World of Outlaws lately has been getting into the picture and into, I guess, the main focus of iRacing lately. And a lot of sanctioning bodies have been left behind. And I know even just in recent years, the push for more sanctioning bodies, more cars, more content in general, while NPass, or I guess it's not got an I in there somewhere, but NPass as I call it still, that's still always a big thing for iRacing. It seems like that's almost been slowed down, or at least the progress as far as growth has been slowed down, because you have all this new focus on, for example, Dirt that's been out for over a year now, GRC, which has been out since December, and really there's always an evolving focus when it comes to road, be it F1, IndyCar, endurance racing, whatever.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, just to add on to that, I think it also depends on how involved the sanctioning body is. When it comes to NPass, for example, how often do you see news pop up on the NASCAR website about the latest results from NPass?
Back in the day, all the time.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's not super often, but they have been putting more and more out there. I can go to NASCAR.com right now. I'm not sure what you can do, Corey, but for example, I was looking today at the latest power rankings for NPass, and I will say NASCAR, at least on NASCAR.com, has kind of stepped it up a little bit.
I have noticed that.
Getting it slowly into the focus of the website, but I like how they're doing it slowly rather than just forcing it out at everybody, because there's a lot of unfamiliar people that, you know, scroll down that website that might not know what it is.
You can lead me to the direction of where to find this on the website, because
yeah, just NASCAR.com and then scroll down.
I think that the problem that Corey's having is an excellent example as well, is you know, these...
Oh, I have it right here. It's about 2/3 of the way down. Yep. Power rankings, race 6 for Dover. And it is here. Ray Alfalla, Luza, Leahy, Clampett, etc., etc. A little bit of a blurb about each one of them after their race. So there is definitely something there.
And so, something that I noticed the World of Outlaws was doing is, as soon as it was announced that they were going to be sanctioning iRacing, there was this big thing right on the front page of the World of Outlaws website for both late models and sprint cars, you know. Oh, and then all of a sudden this World Championship thing comes up, over $17,000 in cash prizes for you know, championships and everything else, and, you know, it caught people's eye, and all of a sudden that has a huge following. And I think that's something that you know, some of these sanctions are not really getting too involved in the iRacing service, and that could be, you know, part of the issue as well, is basically my point.
Yep, so I think that's kind of a good lead, and we are getting into some of the points that I know we all have had with iRacing, and so we'll lead it into our pros and cons. And how this is going to work is the three of us, and one of us will replace Michael DeGroat, who unfortunately is not here for his points. We will have 5 minutes to, at the maximum, to say what we are going to say. So I guess I shall start that off, and my 5 minutes begins right now. So let's see here. I'm going to start with my pros. iRacing is constantly improving. Obviously, there are not many sims out there that will give you a new update, and not just a new update being one piece of content. They give you a huge update every single build. Sometimes it's huge, sometimes it's decent size, but it's always a lot of worthwhile material. It's kind of a pro and a con at the same time. The expanding library of content is obviously excellent, because that means they're always working at it. It's not going away. They're getting licenses. They have interest from different tracks, from different cars, so that they can get all this new content in there. So we have an ever-evolving sim. And of course, dedication to realism. iRacing does not fudge stuff, which, again, that could be a plus and a minus. They are determined to do stuff right. How many sims out there have tried dirt? R-Factor has dirt, but how real is that dirt? It's kind of just, it's dirt. But iRacing takes it to the liberty of actually calculating the moisture content in the track, and trying to actually dynamically adjust the grip visually and physics-wise. And now we have, I mean, it's not perfect, but we have the cushion, which is fully dynamic and fully based on physics and active live dynamic track usage. You don't see that anywhere. Obviously, there are flaws in the physics, but they will always do stuff right, and we're working on dynamic track. I mean, sorry, the 24-hour cycles. That's obviously going to be completely real. It's going to affect the weather, the shadows, all that stuff's going to affect the track, in turn affecting the driving. They're doing it the right way. But going to my first con, development times. When you do stuff the right way and you're calculating stuff the right way and you're doing all this behind the scenes research to figure out how to code this stuff, it's going to take forever, which it does. You're going to have content. We have tracks. We get about 3 tracks a year, and that's on a good year. Now that they're doing dirt and now that they've kind of finished some of the Nürburgring, Le Mans, etc., times have gotten a little bit better, but still, stuff takes forever. We're still waiting on stuff that hashtag Long Beach 8-9 years ago they gave up on it. I mean, we're still waiting on stuff. There's a whole line of British tracks that were scanned in 2012. We're still waiting on it. Where's Silverstone? Where's Michigan? It was scanned in 2013. That's stuff NASCAR. We want to get a good example for NASCAR for the generic fans. We got to get this stuff up to date. It takes forever. Lack of direction and priorities. Like you were saying earlier, Andrew, and Brandon, we're getting all of these sanctions. But what are we doing with them? We have GRC, which, I mean, all has gone on with that sanction, but what about dirt? Okay, we're doing dirt. We're trying to get GRC done. We're trying to update NASCAR. Our Formula One content is pretty light, so they still want to do that. They still want to get the European stuff, and people say we don't have enough European tracks. We don't have enough German tracks. We need more Aussie tracks. Everything is so spread out that we know that they want to get it all done, but what do they want first? Do they want to fill out the dirt library? Do they want to fill out the GRC library? Do they want to get the NASCAR and the base content stuff up to spec? We don't know. It's just we're getting dabs here and there, but we have no lead of where the sim is going. And then my last one, and I don't have the actual numbers behind me, but just based on what we see as active participants of the service, it doesn't seem like there's active growth. It doesn't seem like when we log on versus 5 years ago that there's more people in each split, that there's more series getting participation, that there's more just drivers online that are actually doing something to affect our product. So that is me talking the way I did. I finished a minute early, so I don't know if any guys have any rebuttals to anything I said or any comments towards it.
No, I don't think so. I think that was very well covered, Corey.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That was pretty spot on in a lot of ways. And actually, something that I hadn't really totally thought about, F1 is really light as far as content goes, and even just, I guess, general focus. Obviously, you have the Road Pro Series. That's one thing. But really, aside from the Pro Series that you have in every variation of license, I suppose, you don't have any big focus on F1, which is really odd to me, considering that's, I guess, the worldwide premier form of motorsport. You have WEC that's international, and you have various other sanctioning bodies, I think, but generally it's F1 you want to go to, and really we have one form of F1 car. We don't even have all manufacturers, just one, the McLaren, I believe, which is one of the worst at the time, or at least at the moment, but then you don't even have all the F1 tracks, and we have a Pro Series, which is the F1 cars, and it's pretty lackluster.
Now, I think the issue with this, and I'm heading to the iRacing website right now, is it's not actually sanctioned by F1.
Right,
now,
it's not sanctioned by the FIA.
Yes, and I'm looking now, and there is no sanction from F1 or any affiliate. So where we come in with the sanctions again, and it's the top, road series, and but it all comes back to how involved are your sanctioning partners, and in that particular case, there isn't even a sanctioning partner.
Well, for iRacing, obviously F1, we all know how expensive F1 is, so they would have to pay a gargantuan amount of money for that, and iRacing, whether they physically could or not, it would not be, in my opinion, a good investment. And with the cars, we know how private F1 is. To get the details iRacing needs, they're going to have to go so in-depth, and most F1 teams are not going to allow that. And then for tracks, I mean, there's not really much of an excuse for tracks. We have like 5 or 6, but they just haven't pursued them, again, I think due to the priority status of
Or costs, because it's not sanctioned by any particular series, could be an issue as well.
Yeah, they probably would have to go there. There's some tracks that are at least semi-temporary, and maybe they'd have to go there on an F1 weekend. Maybe there's some kind of clause that we can't come in and do whatever they need to do. So, yeah. But then again, a lot of people on iRacing say that the A license on road is completely useless. Because if you're not a Mitchell DeYoung, if you're not Mitchell DeYoung, what's Martin Kroenke? Sorry, I get my guys mixed up. Martin Kroenke, Gregor Hutu. I'm sorry, those are the only two that I know off the top of my head. If you're not a pro road driver, and you know the F1 takes a science degree to be able to run the damn thing and keep up with it on with all the settings, every single lap, every single corner. If that's not your goal, I mean, what reason is there to be in the A class? What reason is there for iRacing to want to push for that? Because not many drivers seem to want to.
Yeah, most drivers you see nowadays are content running B class road and everything else. So, it's just one of those deals. It's maybe not even really worth it.
Yeah. So we will transition into the next segment, and I believe that is you, Mr. Andrew. So your 5-minute clock begins now.
All right. So just first off, I think Corey even hit on this, is just the focus on realism and authenticity in iRacing is just outstanding. They always want to get things right, like Corey mentioned in depth. So I won't go too in depth on this, since Corey, I think, really hit it right on the spot. But just iRacing is always focused on doing the right thing and doing it, to its entirety, rather than just doing, I guess, pretty much doing 50% of their job. They do 110% normally. So that's pro number one. Pro number two would be just the general amazing development on the service throughout the years. This thing has been around since 2008, and if you were to look at a 2008 version of iRacing and a 2018 version of iRacing, there would clearly be this big shift. There would be that obvious evidence of evolution throughout the years. So I think that's really cool. It's kept up with the times, I think. Also, great focus on bringing sim racing into the focus of esports, but only recently. I kind of touched on that a little bit when we were talking about the NASCAR.com article a little while ago. They're trying, I think, more to get iRacing out there and into the focus of esports, but it's still really minute. There isn't really, I think, as big of a focus as there should be on getting iRacing out there and in the esports focus, but they're certainly working on it. And so I think, as far as 2016, 2017, 2018, I guess, just in recent times, I would make that a pro. They are definitely focusing on it and doing what they can. I think a couple years ago, there was even an event with Tony Stewart, and that was pretty big. So just random things like that are really cool. As we move into the cons, I'll catch my breath here for a moment. I've had strep all weekend, sorry. Anyway, con number one, it's the one that I think everybody talks about when they're thinking about getting into iRacing. Just the general cost. It really does cost a lot. If you want to be competitive on iRacing, generally you're going to need a decent wheel. I've got a Logitech G920 in front of me. Decent, I think, for, not quite entry level, but one step up. And then there's, wheels up there as much as thousands of dollars. It costs a lot, and that's not even getting into the content costs. Each piece of content costs either $12 or $15, and 5 cents off, but whatever. So, every time you want to go, especially if you're just getting into the service and you're not totally sure about it, if you want to go run on the new Daytona, that's going to be, I think, $15 that you're forking over. If you want to run the new NASCAR Cup car or any other, I guess, big-time car, you're going to need $12. And I certainly see why, but it's really, I guess, the word. You look at that and maybe you don't really want to get into it as a new guy to iRacing.com. You just look at the sheer cost, and maybe it's, I guess, a little unattractive, if you will. Con number two, iRacing really has fallen behind on scans and editions, and Corey was talking about that a little bit with Long Beach, for example. And then there's, at one point we were talking about getting the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park oval. They have a little oval. It used to be there. It was dirt at one point and then pavement, and they were talking about getting it scanned. There's Rockingham in the UK. There's countless other tracks, just be it dirt, NASCAR, I guess. NASCAR doesn't really fall behind there because NASCAR pushes it, but just tracks in general, worldwide, that have been, I guess, hinted at or talked about, whatever, that we don't have. So they're falling behind there. And Corey even mentioned, you know, the updated Michigan. That still isn't here. Updated Texas would be nice. Updated, you know, Kentucky, all that. See, and then con number 3, before we get into the overall grade, would be lack of interaction regarding latest developments. That kind of falls into the same thing. But they just don't talk to us as much as maybe they should. And granted, I'll give them this, and Corey actually brought this to my attention, was iRacing 2.0. And Corey, if you want to get into that more later, I won't say too much on it, but there's reasons why we don't really get a whole lot of talk about their latest developments, but I really wish we did hear more about exactly what they're doing, because we are left in the dark a lot of the time. You know, we hear one little teaser here and there, and that's about it for months on end, if not, you know, years sometimes. So that would be my list of pros and cons. My overall grade is an A-. I think, you know, to be around for 10 years is pretty significant because they're still updating, so obviously it's going to be around for years to come. And yeah, I think overall it's just a great service.
Yep, so I will just kind of get into what you were talking about there. I have a little thing here for iRacing 2.0, and it's kind of small text, so I will bring up just quickly on it so you guys can see. I'll try to zoom in. This was a 3-part enhancement process they were going to do in 2011, and some stuff did get done, but a lot of stuff didn't, and the stuff that didn't get done was the stuff that everybody went on about. And the biggest one here, you could see in the August section, we were supposed to get, in August 2011, we were supposed to get endurance racing and driver swaps. 2011, we all know how big that feature is. We just had the Nürburgring 24, the Daytona 24 is huge, a couple other ones off the top of my head, Sebring, Watkins Glen, driver swaps were huge. We didn't get them until, I want to say, 2014, so they missed it by 3 years. And that goes to, again, that goes to talking about development times. And again, I'm not trying to throw iRacing completely under the bus, but when you miss an estimate by 3 years, it kind of gave them a little bit of a message to say, okay, we probably shouldn't give out as direct of estimates, because clearly we can't, if we know we can't nail these dates, then we are better off not giving them.
That's definitely right, and that's why I kind of mentioned it a little bit in my little spiel there, my little rant almost. There is a reason why we don't get a whole lot of, I guess, interaction anymore, and I guess that kind of falls into, you know, one bad apple spoils the bunch, because it was, I guess, definitely more than one bad apple, but just a few bad apples, I guess, kind of ruined that whole thing. And again, I totally understand why we don't get that sort of interaction, but when you brought that up to my attention, Corey, and I really looked into it some more, it's obvious why we don't get that kind of interaction. And as somebody who wasn't around then and would just like to know exactly what they're doing, at least to a point, kind of sucks.
Yeah, we used to get cat herders all the time. Steve Myers and Tony Gardner, he used to actually be known as Loose Lip Gardner, because Tony would sneak out, oh, hey, this may or may not be coming out very soon. He would say that all the time. We get a whole cat herder of, hey, we're working on this, we're working on this. And I mean, pretty much we get cat herders now, but they're on the forums when there's a huge post that insinuates either Steve or Tony to come in and kind of do a little bit of defense. Then they're like, okay, so we're working on this. Yes, we're sorry we're behind on this. That instigates the communication. I mean, I've done it before. I did a huge post in the last summer about tracks, and I'm still not done about that. Pretty much saying how our track's so outdated, but we're still pushing out new stuff. We're trying to sustain the NASCAR clientele, which is one of the biggest clienteles we're going to have. Like you were saying, Andrew, we need Texas, we need Kentucky, because what's a big segment? NBC Sports, they have their Parker Kligerman driving segment, and they love to use iRacing, but what happens when they go to a track we can't use? They don't have up to date. We can't use it. Now, is it as big of a deal that the Talladega grandstands are tore down or Charlotte's grandstand? No, yeah, it still detracts from breaking points, from reference points. So yeah, it's still nice, but we have completely outdated versions. I'll go to Silverstone on the roadside. When it's a major tier stuff, we need to get that stuff up to date. So, but that kind of digresses. So that's Brandon. We will give you your time in the sun to kind of go over your points, and your 5-minute clock, sir, begins now.
All right, yeah. So my first thing on the pro side is realism. That's one of the major things that pulled me into iRacing a few years ago. Was looking at some of these videos and so some of these YouTube channels. Watching the Peak Antifree series broadcasts back when some of these older networks was a thing, and just going through all that stuff, I was like, wow, that almost looks like real life. I want a piece of that. And it was awesome. It's just the focus that iRacing has on realism, and the graphics may not be too great, but the physics are there. Their main focus is how realistic everything is, and I that's one thing I really do give them props for. And that leads me into the next thing. Something that also really, really did pull me into iRacing was that it was always live racing online. So, looking at it, I was looking at the realism. At the time, I was in the NASCAR games, video games, whatever, like every other teenage kid that was into NASCAR. And, I was looking at it, I was like, wow, I can race against real people, real drivers. And, I could get in and race pretty much any time I wanted to against real people. Like, that's awesome. And, my mind was just blown at the time that there was a service around like this, and I was just hearing about it, and, it was, I don't even remember how it came up. I think I stumbled across a YouTube video of iRacing or whatever, and eventually started watching the promos, and, the main focus was the live online racing and the realism that comes with it and all this other stuff, and I thought it was great. And then they started getting into the licensing systems, which match drivers or racers by their own skill level. And, someone coming into this, and especially when I first joined iRacing, this was something that really, really helped me progress through the ranks. Now, granted, now it may be a little bit too easy to progress through the ranks, but that's where, like, iRating and everything else comes into play, and especially the iRating is, if I get into a race with similar iRating, I have a better chance of being able to compete and, winning the race. And, I won my first race in iRacing, and it wasn't easy, and it boosted my confidence, and eventually everything started going up, and I started being more competitive, and that put me against more competitive people. And that's something that is really, really great about iRacing that other sims just really don't have. Is in the official racing is matching people up by their skill level, and as you progress more through iRacing, and the longer you've been on iRacing, it kind of steadies out a little bit, and you start racing against some of the same people that are in the same, situation. They've been on iRacing for a while now, and you start to get to know people, and it's all fantastic. Obviously, now getting into the cons, the overall cost of iRacing, which is something that, especially first getting into it with all the content that you have to buy, it gets expensive. Especially if you're running an official series, where I think someone in chat said this as well. So I think someone in the chat said this as well, was the overall cost is the official series go on, you have to buy each track. And then, of course, the license class, I just talked about this, it really does not work. You can progress way, way, way too quickly. And, it's really useless other than determining what series you can race in. And as Corey was saying, and Andrew, many of the cars and tracks are outdated at this point, and iRacing is just not putting much focus into them at all. So my overall rating was an A-. And, I think the pros really did overweigh most of those cons.
All right, so, and just to bring up our last person, Michael DeGroat, he's not here, but these are his points, his ratings. He loves the large community that we have. Again, I think that's kind of relative towards what you're looking for, because I know I had said it's not, but he says it is. Because there is always a good race. If you're going for NASCAR and stuff like that, or you're going for Skippies or Mazdas, or still a lot of the base dirt stuff, there is really good turnout. So real competition, obviously we are getting AI, but that's only going to be a side effect of iRacing. It's all real competition. You are racing real people. And unlimited replay value. They're really, as we said, there's always new builds, there always is new stuff, so it never, while some stuff may get pushed back, there's always something new that most of the time keeps us wanting to keep playing. But as a con, where Michael is relatively new, I think he's about the same time that you came on, Andrew, about 2 years. The initial cost for him to get into the series he wanted to get into, it took a lot of money. I mean, if you want, someone said it in chat, if you want to get into a new series and you want to be full-time in that series, it could very well cost you $200. If you do $15 a car times 12, if you have to buy the car, you're pushing $200, maybe about $150 if you get bulk credits, but still. Yeah, and while yes, that is a one-time cost, if you want to race 2 or 3 series, that's going to be a lot of money. There's no way around that. So, and then safety rating and protest system aren't enough, and I agree with that, and Brandon kind of got into that. I'll kind of leave this. His rating is a B+, and at the end we'll kind of go over all of our scores, but I want to get into his point there. What do we think, and it'll get into Brandon's point about licensing and stuff, what do we think needs to get done to better the quality of racing via licensing, safety rating, just making sure that people are racing the way they should be? What steps would be advisable for iRacing to consider?
They just have to make it more difficult. Get rid of the fast track system. It's pointless. It's absolutely pointless, and anybody could get up to, you know, a 3.0 by riding in the back and just holding it there to advance up to the next license class, and just, you know, maybe risk 3 races not being competitive, and then as soon as you get to the next class, you get to the 4.0, you fast track right through the classes and whatever. Get rid of that. You know, I don't know many people who are going to just ride around on the back to preserve their safety rating at a 4.0, you know, all season long. You know, that's one of the issues, I think, is that whole fast track system.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just from personal experience in the last couple of years, it was way too easy for me to get to C class. And then from C class up to A was just insanely difficult. It really, and this is just on the oval side, you know, this isn't getting into road, dirt, any of that. But just realistically, in my experience working up through the ranks on oval, particularly through NASCAR and some short tracks and whatnot, it was way too easy to get to a certain point. And then it was hard to move on from there, because you get into these run-ins with these drivers who think they're, you know, I think they're the greatest thing ever, realistically, and they got there a little bit too quickly, I'd say. And you get into these issues, you get wrecked once or twice in a couple of, say, NIS races, because that's accessible to C-class drivers. You're done. You might lose your C-class license, or you just might not get up to B or whatever. You know, it's really easy to get to a certain point, and then it's tough to keep going. Some people can do it real easily and get straight to A right away, but either way, it's way too easy to get out of rookie class and then get into D class and C class.
Yep, and then you have weeks of obviously basing a lot of the schedule off the real world. We all have the weeks that we're like, oh crap, do I actually want to race because I'm going to lose so much this week? Cough, cough, Talladega. Cough, cough, Bristol. Or stuff like that. It's Bristol week. It's Darlington week. Oh, I'm going to hit the wall so many times. It's Kansas week. Kansas is broken. I'm going to hit the wall so many times. I'm going to lose this. We're going to get in wrecks. So that kind of deters you from racing, because we're so worried about a number But like you guys said, we're not getting people in the cars they should be in. When I started back 2008, every single series was 12 weeks. You were in Rookie at the time Legends for 12 weeks. You were in the late model for 12 weeks, etc. By the time I authentically got my A license, Fast Track came out. I was living, because I'm like, I have waited about 30, about probably the better part of a year and a half, 2 years to get my A license, because I had to wait 12 whole weeks for it every time, and I think one time I missed it. And this other guy can just have no life and be on all day and get it in a week. Or 2 days if he really has no life. But
absolutely.
Yeah, we need to find a way to be stricter. We in protests, like how many drivers get protested and we get told
they don't work.
It's a racing incident. And I talked about this before. You can't. iRacing is in a pickle, because if you suspend everybody who races like a tool and deserves to be suspended, they're losing money. But if you let stuff slide, you're degrading the racing. There has to be a better balance, and I know it's not going to be easy, and I don't want to be Nim, and I don't want to be the one who makes these decisions. Because he's calling stuff racing incidents that he well knows is legitimate. Because he has to err on the, hey, don't do that again. They have to have that backlog of...
They're warnings,
yeah, they have to have that line of warning. Like in any job, you have to have 3 warnings and you get fired. So he can't just... Unless it's fully belligerent, he has to err on the side of caution, but... You're going to have that guy who just, oh, well, hey, I just rattled your cage and wrecked you, but I do that every single time, and it's a racing incident. I mean, at some point, racecraft, I think, needs to be accounted for in the protest system, not just belligerent being a tool.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's times, like the one time I've been suspended on iRacing was for a Carb Cup race, and it was, I think, 5 of us. It was just friends, and I guess one guy took it a little too seriously, protested me, because it was the Cup cars at Charlotte. That's what Carb Cup is, and it was at Charlotte that particular week. And I was playing with him. I just got right up on his bumper, was playing with the air, and we ended up wrecking just because we were having fun. And he took it a little bit too seriously, which he has the provocative to do, I guess, if I can get words out. And he protested me, but I got suspended for the wrong reason, really. He protested. Obviously, now we have the audio straight from iRacing, so that's it's a nice thing to have, but it can be a little annoying in this kind of circumstance. One of my other friends was actually, I guess, singing the Jaws theme, and I ended up getting suspended because my friend was singing the Jaws theme, and then he and I ended up wrecking. So... realistically, I'd have to go back and find the email, but I believe it was worded mostly that he was singing the Jaws theme, and then we wrecked. Not even that we wrecked, but just because he was singing the Jaws theme before we wrecked, I got suspended. And so, I'm not saying that necessarily getting suspended for that isn't right, but there certainly should be, I guess, some sort of... I don't even know what the word is, but basically there should be an emphasis more on the serious issues where, say, somebody's protesting somebody in Pickup Cup, for example, who just sits on the track and doesn't move, or really any other series. That should be dealt with first over something dumb in a Carb Cup race of 5 drivers. Like, I mean, I've been in plenty of C-fixed, A-fixed, B-fixed, whatever races where there's guys just, they don't care. One little tap... And, those cars are sensitive. Doesn't matter even if it's the truck. They're sensitive to air. One little tap will send them right around in some cases. And realistically, I know a lot of those things get protested. Those don't get dealt with, but then there's issues where it's just a Carb Cup race of 5 guys, and that gets dealt with first. What?
Yeah, so I do want to... kind of, just so we don't go too long here, I want to get into a little bit of the pros. We've been kind of ranting and ragging for about Lord knows how long. Let's spin it around. Let's talk about what iRacing does right. iRacing does right. We talked about physics. Everything is correct. Everything is the way it should be. I'll say everything graphically after 2011-ish. I think Spa is kind of the turning point, maybe a little bit after that. They used a new shader model or lighting model, like way to get the colors and stuff more accurate. After that, everything is stunning. Like, I love just going into scenery, going in, like, I'll be on the grid, and pretty much I'll be just shift control Z in cameras, and while I'm supposed to be gridding, I'm just looking around the scenery at the side of the track. Brandon's got me doing this plenty of times. I'll be looking at Knoxville and just seeing, oh hey, there's a Taco Bell at Knoxville as there's cars passing through a red light. Like, they're nailing these tracks. They're nailing the models of the new cars. Yes, there's some issues, but inside and out, the cars are gorgeous. They are really expanding the content. It is improving the pace. Not is it great? No, but it is improving. They're getting a lot of new sanctions. There is a lot more money on the line. They are working more for the esports. There's kind of a whole business created out of iRacing. Doing, I mean, Andrew, all of us broadcasting. I mean, we have little side businesses. It's created almost a commercial aspect of it, and at the same time, that's free publicity for iRacing because we're getting broadcasts out there to people that maybe not have the foggiest idea about iRacing. They're like, oh hey, this looks like real life TV. And I mean, if we do it right, which I think all of us in this room broadcast pretty well, we can convert people into iRacing just because of that. So there's a lot of stuff that has been created here, and I'll get you guys at your points in that they are doing a lot right. Or
yeah. No, they definitely are. And, you know, going back to the whole broadcast thing, and that's how I got pulled into iRacing, was by watching broadcasts and stuff, is exactly what you said, Corey. Hey, this is kind of like watching it on TV. I wonder what it's like, you know, actually driving the car. And obviously I can't afford a race car, so next best solution is a simulator, and, well, here I am.
Yeah, I mean, just in my time broadcasting, it's only been, I want to say, around 10 months or so. I've noticed tons of comments of just, you know, basic. I mean, I just do NASCAR broadcasts realistically, at least mostly NASCAR dirt, and there's just random NASCAR fans that find the stream and ask, hey, how can I get into this? And, you know, we'll take our time in the middle of the broadcast, especially if there's a caution or whatever. We'll take our time best as we can to provide them with the info, because realistically, that's one of the best. I mean, that's how I found out about iRacing. That I was watching some NPAS broadcasts back when I was probably 12, 13, and just was like, hey, I want to do this. You know, I played NASCAR video games for plenty of years, and I want to get into this. And so realistically, as a broadcaster, you're going to come into all sorts of those situations where you're just going to find a random NASCAR fan, or, you know, if it's road racing, a random F1 fan, for example, maybe. They just want to know how to get into it. And I mean, it happens all the time. It really does happen more than people think. It happens a ton. It
does, and it's good. And the peak broadcast is a lot. Obviously, the viewer field on peak broadcasts and World Championships is a lot higher than our channels are. Not to degrade us, but I mean, obviously, that's what's being promoted, and that's all it is oh, this is cool, and I mean, it really is. So they are doing that aspect of it right, and we don't want to have this degrade. So we are gonna try to wrap this up, get to final thoughts, and I think I have it here. There's a little bit of a reference from InsideSimRacing, and this goes back to kind of predate the beginning of iRacing. This is from 2012. I'll bring it up here, and you can see this is what InsideSimRacing used to give their score of dead InsideSimRacing, mind you, to give their score of iRacing. And back in 2010, they gave iRacing a 85. They said the physics were about a 14 and a quarter, graphics were about 8 3/4. Pretty much the lowest score they gave a category was cost, and that was 3.5 out of 5. So, and mind you, this is how they rated stuff a long time ago,
when everything was a lot more expensive as well.
Yeah, tracks were $25+, etc. So, but that's 85, and our overall grade here is a B+, which would equate to 87-ish. So I guess it really hasn't changed too much, but I gave it a B. I was the most critical. Michael DeGroat gave it a B+. Andrew and Brandon both an A-. So, I mean, who would complain about a B+ in school? There's nothing wrong with that. And
absolutely.
The question is is a B plus, at least in our eyes, worth it over, again, buying Project Cars 2 for $60 and a couple of DLC packs? That's $100 tops. Is it worth it for Assetto Corsa? Is it worth it for Automobilista? I mean, do I dare say NASCAR Heat 2 or something like that? Or what the heck else? I can't even think of it. You guys get the Forza, whatever. Gran Turismo Sport. Is iRacing, at that grade, in our opinion, worth it over that kind of other title?
By far. I have to jump on that real quick. I think iRacing is by far worth it. I know I've sunk hundreds of dollars, more than I really even want to keep track of, so I don't keep track of it, but I've sunk way too much into it. But realistically, this is one of the only ways, just a casual race fan who is into gaming, you can say gaming even though it's a sim, I know that's a whole debate of its own, but if you're into gaming and you're just a casual race fan, or even a really serious race fan, I mean, realistically, iRacing in some regard is for you. Even if you just race every once in a while, really casually, say maybe in D class, for example, I think it's for any race fan in any regard. You mentioned all sorts of other, you can almost call them simulators now. Assetto Corsa, Automobilista, and whatnot. Those are great games, but they are just that, they're games still. They still have a little ways to go. And I mean, they are graphically, they are there. They are even past iRacing in some situations, and even just, I guess, the hitboxes with the cars, past iRacing in some situations, but that's because those are things that you can more easily do in depth on a console rather than just on a PC. And this is made for guys who, in some cases, I mean, Ty Majeski, one of the best guys on Oval on iRacing, races on a laptop. So iRacing wants to keep that sort of compatibility, if you will, at least I believe, based on what they do, rather than just going full-blown in-depth.
And think of the percentage of processing power. Everything.
Exactly.
If iRacing, if we take 100% of processing power, graphics power, what have you, iRacing dedicates, we're just throwing a number out there, I'd say 70% of that to physics, leaving 30% to graphics and UI and yada, yada, yada. You're going to have a Gran Turismo, a Project Cars, maybe not so much R Factor, but at least the console side of it. They're taking, it's flip-flopped. It's 70%, 75% graphics, and only that other 25% is going towards physics and everything else, because it's fudged. It's fudged to be as good as it can be, but it's still fudged, which is why you're going to have the shortcomings with it that are dug up. So, but for that 30% approximately that we have for graphics, they do a phenomenal job on the new stuff with it. Should we still have Las Vegas and Atlanta and Homestead and Darlington that haven't been touched in 10 years? I mean, like we said, it has been told that iRacing, from Tony Gardner himself, that they are putting more resources towards updating the older content. We'll see what that happens. We'll see how that happens. But again, there is a lot of stuff right. So I think here we're on about an hour. So kind of give, I'll go last because I always talk first. Final thoughts.
We did list a lot of cons about iRacing, but in the end, they are one of the best at what they do, which I think is why we're all still here, you know. And, you know, if cost was an issue, if graphics was an issue, I know I wouldn't still be here. You know, a lot of these console, they like to call themselves sims. They're games. You know, graphics, even, you know, a little bit of better of a damage model, whatever. Nobody matches the physics that iRacing can pull off, or the way that the tracks are modeled. Every little bump and everything, you know, modeled into the track, comes with the laser scanning. There's a lot of time and money that iRacing puts into this, and you know, in the end, to me, iRacing worth it over any other sim.
Yeah, I have to 100% agree. It goes back to what we were just talking about, Corey. Realistically, iRacing it's far and away better. It has different focuses from those console games, and that's why those console games can be, I guess, even in the same argument, because there's just totally different focuses as far as, you know, what's needed. Because, you know, they can do a lot more with graphics over there, and they don't do quite as much with physics, if you will, whereas iRacing is dedicated to, being the legitimate track, being the legitimate car, rather than being the next best thing. It's dedicated to being what you see, say, on a NASCAR broadcast every Sunday afternoon. And that's why we can present it so well, I think, because it is just staggeringly close to what they actually do. It doesn't matter what discipline of racing it is, it's easily presentable because it is the closest that you can get right now. I mean, they started from something that started in 2000, well, not in 2003, but is known for a game in 2003. It started back in the 90s, and it's been here ever since. And I think that's why they're so good at what they do. They're rooted back in Papyrus, which is from the 90s, and they're still around.
Yeah, and like you said, it's been, I mean, I'm sure there's like one line of code in there that's in there from the 90s, but obviously they've done a lot to it. There's still some parts of it that we can see from NR 2003, to be honest. Like the main UI, when you're sitting there at the drive screen, that still just bleeds NR 2003, and that's fine. I mean, I know they're still working on that with the new UI, but like I said, iRacing, they do a lot right. I've been around, I've been spending I've easily spent over $2,000 on iRacing, easily. If you want to count for how much I've spent to build myself into iRacing, I'm not going to disclose that just in case my wife's listening, but yes, I am here for the long haul. I'm not going anywhere. I've downloaded Project Cars 2. I've downloaded a whole bunch of other stuff. I can't play consoles anymore. I can only race on iRacing. If I'm not doing iRacing, I'm doing something completely different. Nothing else in the realm of driving. They've won that over for me. Only thing that I want to see different on iRacing is I want to see everything be treated the same content-wise. I want to see pricing. If there's going to be older content that's untouched, I want it to be reflected. I don't want people paying full price for something that shouldn't be full price for, to be honest. I want people to be racing the way they should be racing, and that goes to what we said earlier. They got to stiffen up on the penalties, but at the same time not deter customers. They need to find that balance. Right now it's not there. But like we said, I love broadcasting. I mean, we were very gracious tonight. Our league did not, they let us take the night off to do this, so appreciate that. I know Andrew, you'll see him on LSR TV, his own channel, Pit Stop TV, PSI TV. So we all love iRacing. We're all in here for the long haul. PTR TV is not going anywhere. If you guys like this, the review, we will start doing more of these. Believe me, we would love to have Andrew on. We can do some more collabs to help out both channels. So it's been a great night. Anything else you guys want to say about anything whatsoever?
No, I don't think so.
Real quick, I want to touch on just that whole thing with how Darlington and let's see, Texas, Atlanta, and a couple other tracks are just completely untouched. We don't have nighttime for those, for example. That's why I mentioned those certain tracks. I think part of why they haven't done anything is day to night transitions has probably been on their mind, in the very back of their mind for a while. And so I think the day to night transitions is going to make both day and night possible every track here soon. I think it doesn't matter what you're racing, doesn't matter what you're racing. I think we're going to have that option here relatively soon whenever we finally get that, because realistically, if they model each object at each track as its own thing to cast its own shadow and whatnot, if they do it right, they can just pretty much copy and paste that sort of code onto tracks instead of making certain tracks work certain ways, if that makes sense. If they were to just map shadows the same regardless of the object, or I guess regardless of where the object is, meaning what track it's on, if each object just acts the same way, I think it's going to be really applicable to every track. I think Darlington will get nighttime soon in Texas, and everything else.
Because right now the shadows are pre-baked in, so if they just, like you said, if it's just dynamic, hey, this is the light, this is what's around it, so just do shadow. I get what you're saying. So again, I would love to see that. I would love to see the retro walls, but again, that goes back to that just goes back to business model. What are we worried about? Are we worried about making everything the same, or are we worried about pushing out new stuff and kind of So that's the fine line of iRacing, but again, we love it. Our overall grade, a B+, so that's almost a 90. That's nothing to shame about. iRacing.com. There's a bunch of promo codes for new people out there. If you have a friend who they like NASCAR, they like whatever form of racing it is, they can get on iRacing most likely. I don't have the exact codes right in front of me, they could probably get on iRacing for about $5 for 3 months. They can try out a whole bunch of stuff. They could try out GRC for free. They could try out Dirt for free. They can get into base, like the older content of NASCAR, see if they want to do that. They can go on iRacing Live. They can see broadcasts. They can see stuff that way. Does that interest them? So we got to grow the sport, the esport. We love iRacing. We're all here. We need to help grow it. iRacing's a small company. They can't do it all themselves. We need to help grow this. So again, signing out for tonight's broadcast. That's how used to it we are. Signing out of tonight's podcast is I have Brandon Krutz to my left. I have Andrew Cardinello IV on the right. That is the Racer's Mind PTR TV. Check us out. Subscribe to the PTR TV. If you have not done so, go check out Andrew's channel, PSI TV. He's on YouTube and Facebook, so help support the channels. We'll do this again if you guys like it. So have a great night, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Have a great night, everybody. Catch you next time.
Have a good one.